What's going on, you guys? Paul here from BikeNerds, currently driving, coming to you guys with another video. Currently en route to go pick up what you would consider a grail bike in the BMX collecting hobby. I found this thing on Marketplace. It was about an hour and a half away, and I found it within 10 minutes of it being listed. And the moment I sat down and saw it, I didn't hesitate. I reached out and I sent the guy a message. And luckily, hopefully, I'm not going to jinx myself yet, but the guy said that he's going to hold it for me. He's currently holding it for me while I make the hour and a half drive. And yeah, going to pick up a bike that I've been searching for a very long time. And I think you guys are going to dig it, which is why I wanted to bring you guys along with me. So I'm going to go check this thing out. And like I said, I hope to gosh that the guy holds it for me. You know, I even called and confirmed that we're locked in. And he said we're good to go. He wouldn't do me like that. So like I said, I'll see you guys in a little bit after I go and check it out. So I'll see you guys in a minute. All right, so I just got home. Let's go ahead and check out what we got. Oh man. Now some of you guys might know exactly what this is, but some of you guys might have no idea. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this thing out and let's take a look. Check this thing out. This thing is freaking rad. All right, so what we're looking at here is a 1997 Hoffman Bikes Condor, which is Matt Hoffman's signature frame and fork that he used to ride and compete with. Now, some of you guys might know who Matt Hoffman is, some of you might not. I gotta remember that it's 2025 currently. A lot of you guys that were born post 2000 might not have a clue who Matt Hoffman is. But if I were to try to describe who Matt Hoffman is to somebody that had no clue who he was, I would almost say he was the Tony Hawk of BMX, if that makes any sense. I'm assuming everybody in the world knows who Tony Hawk is and what he does for skateboarding. But if you can imagine another figurehead for BMX that is as monumental and is as legendary, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word I'm looking for to describe him. He originally started riding for Haro bikes, and even at such a young age, you could just see he was extremely talented, and his willingness to take risk and just push the bar higher and evolve the sport into what it is currently today. I don't think BMX would really be what it is today without people like Matt Hoffman involved. Matt Hoffman was one of those guys that took BMX and pushed it and pushed it and pushed it way to its limits. Basically, he wanted to see how high he could go and how far he could push these things. And as a result, you know, he was breaking bikes left and right. So that thus in turn birthed his own company, Hoffman Bikes, and his whole endeavor behind that was just to make strong bikes that would put up with the abuse and the, you know, the stuff that guys were doing at the time. You know, in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, there was a time when freestyle BMX was more or less just people doing, you know, like little front wheel hops and stuff like that to like sock hop music. And Matt Hoffman was more or less like a ramp rider, a vert rider, a half pipe rider. And like I said, he was just an absolute animal. The guy was just pushing the limits well beyond what anybody else was doing at the time. And as a result, he was just folding and wadding these bikes up pretty much left and right. And the idea behind Hoffman Bikes was just strong bikes that could put up with the abuse that he was throwing at it. And like I said, the Condor model was his signature frame and fork. Now this is a 1997, so it's a little bit later in the years. There was a couple of iterations of this ones. The first ones were made in the early 90s, and those were American made. And then later on in time, once the demand outgrew their shop, they contracted and started to have some of their frames and forks produced in Taiwan. This is one of their Taiwan models, so unfortunately it's not one of the American-made ramp rims, but it really doesn't take much away from this particular bike because, like I said, it is a legendary frame. It is a legendary model, named after a legendary rider and a legendary, just a legend to BMX in general. So anyway, now that some of you guys are up to speed on who Matt Hoffman is, let's just go ahead and take a look at this thing. This thing, as far as I can tell, was not really ridden or really beat on too much. It is in really good shape considering, you know, typically BMX bikes get beat up pretty good. They get tossed around, they get scratched and scarred, but this one is still in really good shape. I think this one's gonna clean up really nice. And as far as what I'm gonna do to this one, I'm not gonna really do anything to this one other than just clean it up and just make it look nice. And if I change any of the parts, it's probably gonna be these grips here, because these grips are pretty womped out. And I'm probably actually gonna utilize this big cheese brake plate up here and put front brakes on this bike, because I think that would be pretty sick. It's got some Primo mustache bars on it, which are also in really good shape, although they do appear to have been cut down. But that was just what we did back then. And it's got this really interesting old school Odyssey module lever, which as you can see utilizes 2 brake cables in order to grab the gyro, which is actually pretty neat. And it's got this ginormous barrel adjuster, which I kind of find humorous. I mean, the thing's hoss, but pretty sweet bike all in all. Moving over to this side, we see we got some T1 or Terrible One pegs that also look like they've never even, I don't think these pegs have ever even been grinded on or anything like that, but they're in pretty good shape. And one of my favorite parts about this bike right here, right now, is these wheels, and particularly these hubs in general. These hubs right here were pretty much game changing as far as BMX is concerned. This whole bike is kind of game changing as far as BMX is concerned. But anyway, I'm gonna start by pulling the wheels off it and stuff like that, just so I can clean the frame up really good, and then we'll go from there. So let's get it. I'm gonna start by pulling this front wheel off of it. So I'm not exactly a historian on these Gack hubs yet, but these might be the American-made ones. Not sure. I'm gonna pull this rear wheel off now. I'm also gonna pull this chain off it real quick, because why not? That way, as we're cleaning the frame up, we don't gotta worry about it dragging all over the chainstay and getting all in our way. And plus it'll allow us to clean this chain up really nice. Unclip the brakes. By doing that, that allows these calipers to spread open so we can get our wheel out. Alright, so now that I got the wheels and tires off, what I think I'll do now is I'm going to take it outside, put it on my wash stand, get some hot soapy water, and just give this thing a nice bath and scrub it down. Just clean all this old dirt and dust off it, and then after that we can go ahead and really start polishing it up. So first steps first, let's go ahead and knock all this dust and dirt off it and get this thing cleaned up. Got my trusty wash sock, my soapy water. You can tell this bike wasn't ridden very hard. The dropouts are still in really good shape. They're not all chewed up. It looks like the wheel was maybe bolted on and never moved. Typically these dropout slots are all chewed up. And like I said, as I took the wheels off, I looked at the pegs that were on it. It looks like they've never been grinded on, however you want to pronounce it, since they were installed. So pegs look brand new. These dropouts look great. Everything on this bike's in great shape. As with cleaning up any of these old bikes, typically back here behind what they call the bottom bracket, the drivetrain area, it's always going to be the dirtiest. There's always a bunch of grease, caked up grease and mud from the wheel just spinning and flinging all the mud collecting up here, and it's often a part of the frame that's most overlooked when it comes to washing and detailing a bike. But that's why I like to pull the wheels and everything off, just so I can get on the inside of the chain stays and the seat stays, and just, you know, it really takes but a moment to pull the wheels off, you know. So this fork is awesome right here. This fork, like I said, how this bike kind of was a big part in the evolution of bikes as we know it, and the evolution of the sport as we know it. There was a point in time when, you know, axle pegs and forks weren't really designed to jive well with each other. It's like pegs were just an afterthought, that was just an accessory that you would put on your bike. Nobody was, at that point, was really doing serious grind tricks or anything like that. So as a result, people would bolt pegs on their bikes, and the fork dropouts would either dig into whatever they were trying to grind and immediately stop them to a screeching halt, or they would bend and snap the axles. So in order to combat that, Hoffman designed this here, and this is called the super fork. And the idea behind the super fork was you got the dropout here, you got the axle here, and you bolt the peg itself to the actual fork. And what that does is keeps your dropout out of the way, it keeps your axle safe from getting bent and broke. And it was just, you know, an innovative concept for the time. And for the time, it kind of worked. And it wasn't until later on in the game they started to design dropouts, forks, and axles specifically around, you know, the use of pegs, and why dropouts on forks are shaped the way they're shaped nowadays to give the peg clearance. Yeah, Hoffman Super Fork, pretty neat. You don't see too many of these anymore, I tell you. These handlebars are pretty neat too. The Primo mustache bars. I almost want to say that these could have been some of the first handlebars that Primo offered as a product for handlebars, but I'm not 100% certain on that. So don't quote me on that, but it seemed like this was right around the time Primo was starting to come out, like mid 90s is when I started to see Primo stuff popping on the scene. And even myself, I used to run the Primo meat tenderizer pedals exclusively, just because they gripped, you know, nice wide strong platform, and they gripped. Never had my feet slip off them, but God forbid you ever caught a shinner from one of those. And this stem looks really nice. All right, she's cleaning up pretty good. And once we get some like wax and polish going on this thing, it's gonna look amazing. As you can see, it's cleaning up pretty good. Once we get the handlebars and everything all polished up, get a nice coat of wax on the frame, I think she'll shine pretty good. I still got a little bit to go though. I want to get in that brake area, get those cleaned up really nice, and just, you know, give it a good once over again. So let's do it. Now that we got the frame pretty much cleaned up, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on them wheels now. All right guys, so I figured it'd probably just be easiest to just bring these wheels in here and clean them in this laundry tub. I mean, why not, you know? These wheels, as I mentioned, are probably one of my favorite parts of this particular bike. And the reason being is because, I don't know if you guys will be able to see in there, it says Gack Products, G-A-C-K. Now, I'm not 100%, like I said, I'm not an expert or historian on this stuff. I wasn't there. But to my understanding, Chris Gack was an employee of Hoffman Bikes, and I believe a pro rider as well. And if you guys recall back to what I was talking about earlier, about during the time when, you know, people were just pushing the limits of bikes and trying to go bigger and just, you know, do gnarlier stunts and tricks, the bikes themselves were having a really hard time just putting up with the abuse. Specifically, the axles on the wheels. Back in the day, it was standard that all these BMX bikes had 3/8 or 10 millimeter axles. And once you start putting, you know, axle pegs and extensions and stuff on it, you know, it don't take much to just snap a 3/8 axle. And that was becoming a major problem in the, you know, in the sport with the, you know, with the introduction of grind tricks and just, you know, gnarlier flatland stuff. So in order to combat that, Chris Gack, working with Hoffman Bikes, designed just a whole different hub shell and a whole different concept that utilized these giant 14 millimeter axles. And by utilizing these 14 millimeter axles, just added so much strength and, you know, just so much more durability to these wheels that I'm not going to say it made bending and snapping axles a thing of the past, but it made it a lot less common. Because you got to think, when these guys were snapping and bending 3/8 axles anytime they would go out and ride their bike. You know, can you imagine breaking your bike every time you went out and rode it? That's what was happening with these guys, because these guys, like I said, they were pushing the limits. They were going bigger, they were going harder, they were going faster, they were going higher than everyone else out there at the time. And like I said, the bikes just weren't designed to put up with that. So, but basically by breaking all these bikes, it just sparked innovation, and people just wanted to design and create bikes that would withstand the abuse. So, like I said, we just started. The 90s was a really fun and interesting time for BMX because, you know, we knew what we were doing, but at the same time, we had no clue what the hell we were doing. We were just making stuff stronger, you know, stronger and heavier. The mid-90s is when you started to see, I say, the most innovation. I'd like to say that the mid-90s was like what really sparked the innovation to make bikes as strong as they are today. I like to refer to the mid-90s as the go big or go home era of BMX, because that's pretty much what it was. You had dudes like, you know, Matt Hoffman, early 90s, and even in the late 80s, Matt Hoffman was a complete animal, but he raised the bar big time as far as what people were doing competitively and just even on the streets. Like I said, I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure, and it is alleged that Matt Hoffman was the first person to ever grind a BMX bike, which I don't doubt. He is a very innovative figure for the sport. And I don't know why I keep referring to it as a sport, because, I mean, it can be a sport. It can be anything you want it to be. That's the beautiful thing about BMX is BMX can be anything you want it to be. It can be a fun hobby to pass the time. It can be your exercise. It can be your sport if you want to compete. Me, it's like all the above. And more or less than anything, it's my passion and it's almost my therapy. You know, not to sound weird, but you know, riding bikes and restoring these old bikes is very therapeutic to me, and I just love this stuff. You know, ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved BMX bikes, and that has definitely not changed at all. If anything, now that I'm older, I love them more. But that could be attributed to maybe a midlife crisis thing, but who the heck knows? But, yeah, man, this bike, this Condor that I just picked up, this thing sparked a little bit of drama. Well, then again, maybe I sparked the drama because, you know, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't have a lot of friends. And I think the reason I don't have many friends is because I am quick to call people out on bullshit. You know, it's shady in how certain people operate and just have zero ethics when it comes to certain things, like old school bikes, for example. And case in point, when I reached out to this guy that was selling this bike, you know, I had to explain to him, like, I'm over an hour and a half away from you. I have cash in hand, and you know, as long as you hold it for me, I'll come and get it. Because you gotta understand, there's only so many of us here in Michigan that like to collect and restore these old things. So when one of these things pops up, we're pretty much all, you know, fighting over it. Not like fighting over, but everybody just scrambling and doing whatever they got to do to try to score the bike, you know what I'm saying? Especially when it's a good deal. You know, there's people out there that list shit at crackhead prices, and then every now and again a good deal pops up. This was a great deal, I would say. But anyhow, you know, I explained to the guy that I'm an hour and a half away, and that, look, your phone's probably going to explode with people wanting this thing. And he's like, well, you're the first person to message me and inquire, so therefore you're the first person that gets it. As long as you come and get it, I'll hold it for you. So I think that's the only reason I got this thing, is because I saw it listed, and it was listed within 6 minutes. Within 6 minutes, I was replying to the guy. So He said I was the first in line, so I told him I was coming to get it. Anyway, it's an hour and a half drive, and the whole time I was driving there, I was just sweating bullets because I knew exactly what was going on. There was other people in the hobby that were trying to snake it and, you know, outbid me or whatever so they could get it. But the thing that annoyed me the most is literally this guy explained to these people, he didn't show me all the conversations, but he showed me a couple of them that he had with a couple of them. Because like I said, once he told me he had a bunch of people interested, I started naming them off. I was like, yeah, you probably got this guy, that guy, this guy, and he kind of humorously laughed. He was like, yeah, that's pretty much all of them. And I was like, yep. I explained to him that every time a cool bike pops up, you know, we all battle for it. So as he showed me the conversations, one of the things that really annoyed me the most was this guy had already explained to a few of them that the bike was already pending and that I was driving an hour and a half away to come pick it up, and that if I didn't show up, you know, he would keep them in mind. As a Hail Mary attempt, some of these people then started offering this guy like up to 3 times his asking price in order to like buy the guy out and just, I don't know, screw me over. Which personally, I don't think that's very cool. I don't think that's very ethical. I've never done that to anybody, and I've been collecting and restoring these old bikes for over 20 plus years at this point. I've never screwed anybody over like that or tried to purposely screw anybody over like that. But it seems to be a really common thing in the hobby these days. It's just like, yeah, I don't know what the deal was. And like I said, I showed up. I always take more money than, you know, let's say we lock in a deal. I know what's going on. I knew that the guy was going to have $300, $400, $500 offers by the time I got there, which is why I always take like $500, $600 with me just to combat that. You know, if they say, well, this guy's, you know, I've had that happen. Showed up expecting to pay one price and I have to pay out more just because some invisible bidder that's not there with cash in hand. I'm sorry I cost. And another guy that wasn't even in the state of Michigan, he wanted the guy to ship the bike. Once the guy explained that I was en route to pick it up, he then told the seller, you're selling that bike way too cheap. That's at least an $800 bike. Like, really, dude? Like, you're going to try to sabotage somebody else's good deal just because it's not going to you? It's like, have we stooped that low, you guys? It's like, come on now. They're just bicycles. They're just bicycles, okay? Anyway, everything that I just told you, I pretty much went onto the BMX Museum forum and said exactly that. And my intention with that thread wasn't to call anybody out specifically. It was just to shed a light on a toxicity that exists in this old school BMX hobby, and that is trying to snake each other and outbid each other or whatever, you know? I think the only reason I even got this bike is because, like I said, I was the first one to inquire, and the guy that I bought it from was an actual man of integrity. You know, anybody else, the moment people started offering $300, $400, $500, I probably would have gotten ghosted, and, you know, they would have ended up with it. And you know what the result of that would have been? These hubs would be on eBay right now. That frame would be on eBay right now. Those forks would be on eBay. This whole bike would have gotten blown apart into 100 pieces and sold at a profit. That shit pisses me off. At least when it's in my possession, it's going to remain a complete bike. I'm going to take it to bike shows. I'm even considering riding this thing this weekend. We're having a Detroit Street Jam, August 2nd. Detroit, Riverside Skate Park, 2 p.m. Detroit City Street Jam. I'm even considering riding this thing there just because. It's one of the main reasons I'm cleaning it up. I haven't nailed that decision down yet, but you know, it's going through my mind. This bike is pretty rad. I wouldn't mind riding it, but anyway, enough of my yapping. I got the back wheel all cleaned up. Let's go ahead and get this front one shined up now. Like I said, I'm not going too crazy with it. I'm just hitting it with the old 1-2. Cleaning all the grease and the funk and the gunk off cleaning the gunk off the Gacks. Yeah, these Gack hubs are freaking sweet. And from what I believe, these Gack hubs were the first hubs in the BMX market to be offered with 14 millimeter axles. These hubs alone pretty much innovated the entire wheel industry as we know it. Once these things popped on the scene, pretty much 3/8 axles disappeared for a good long while, and bikes were pretty much running 14 millimeter axles. Yeah, these things are cleaning up. And these definitely weren't the easiest wheels to clean. 48 spokes. Back then we used to run 48 spokes on our wheels. The idea was more spokes, more stronger. And that kind of held up for a little while, but then we started to introduce double wall, triple wall, just super overbuilt heavy wheels. Once manufacturing technologies advanced and once the materials, started to utilize better raw materials, just wheels naturally got stronger after that. So, all right, give it a quick rinsey. All right, now I'm happy with it. I'm just giving it a wash. I'm not gonna go ahead and start trying to metal polish all the hubs and this and that. I'm just trying to cleaning it up. That's all. All right, thin. Got the wheels clean, ready to go. Sweet. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna go ahead and hit this frame and put a nice coat of wax on it. Bring some of this color back to it because it's got all these little micro hairline scratches all over it and the color is faded. I think just by doing a quick coat of wax, this thing will shine up real nice. So hopefully it'll bury them out of those little scratches and we'll be looking good. This frame's a really neat color. In certain lights it almost looks black, but when you get out in the sun, it's this beautiful like emerald green color, like British racing green. But in this light it almost looks kind of black. It looks dark. I like putting a coat of wax on all of my bikes. It helps protect the frame. It helps water and dirt and mud shed off of it in the event you find yourself bombing through a big puddle or something like that. And like I said, it just makes the bike just look a little nicer. Let's see, if I was smart, I would remove all these cables, but I'm not going super crazy on this one. Like I said, I'm just cleaning this one up because I am possibly going to be riding this thing on Saturday. I'm probably going to be putting a good 20 plus miles on this thing, which is crazy to think about, but it ain't nothing to you, boy. 20 miles, it ain't nothing. It's kind of funny. I'm an avid cyclist. I ride BMX, mountain bikes, and just bikes in general. I love them all. And then when you talk to I guess people that aren't into the hobby, aren't into bikes, and they ask you oh, what'd you do this weekend? You say, oh, I just went on a 30-mile bike ride. Or you tell them you rode 30 miles on your bike. They just can't comprehend. They're like, you did what? That just seems impossible to, I guess the normal person, but 30 miles on a bike, that, just cruising, that's only 3 hours. So yeah, I love these old bikes, particularly these old freestyle bikes. The thing I liked about freestyle, it was all about, it was freestyle. It was all about self-expression. It was all about, punk rock. It was rebellious. It was, it was just different than racing. I loved racing as well, but I believe it was Magoo that said there's a cap to racing. You're as with any kind of racing, it doesn't really matter how good you are. You're always competing with somebody else's wallet, okay? So, especially with car racing. But freestyle was cool because any kid with any bike could go outside and just start learning, doing tricks, and having fun. There was no limits. There was no right or wrongs. There was no first place. There was no last place. It It was just having fun on your bike. Self-expression, being creative, challenging yourself, you know, learning new things. That's why I've always gravitated towards freestyle. The Hoffman Super Fork. Now this fork alone is a pretty cool and substantial part as far as the evolution of BMX is concerned. As you guys can see right here, it has a built-in peg boss. Now, there was a time when grind tricks, sliding on your pegs on your bike, wasn't like a normal trick. It wasn't until like the early to mid 90s is when people started utilizing their pegs for grinding and sliding on stuff. Previous to that, pegs were more or less just for doing, you know, like frame standing tricks. They were just like standing platforms for doing, you know, the old school freestyle routines and the carting your friends around. Once people started bolting pegs on their axles and started to grind ledges, and just the sport evolved into more of a hardcore street kind of level of riding, these bikes are just getting destroyed. Particularly snapping the axles that the pegs are threaded onto. So in order to combat the bending and the snapping of the axles, Hoffman incorporated these peg bosses right here so that you could bolt the peg directly itself to the fork, and that would basically keep your axles and your wheel straight. But it was just a temporary solution, but it was a cool innovation. It was thinking out of the box, and it was trying to, you know, correct a problem that existed during that time. Nowadays, forks are pretty much designed with like peg integration, you know, in mind, so that it, you know, the dropout doesn't interfere with how the peg grabs are going underneath, or, you know, you don't have to worry about your dropout grabbing a ledge or whatever you're trying to grind, because everything's pretty much designed with the thought of having a peg on it. And plus, axles in general have just gotten so much through manufacturing, technology, and just raw materials. You know, everything's just gotten stronger and lighter over the years, so we really don't need the 14 millimeter axles in the front anymore, and we don't really need to bolt the pegs themselves to the actual fork legs. You know, we can just install them on the wheel and not really have to worry about it. But still, you know, no particular wheel set or axle set is immune to breaking and snapping an axle when you ride hard enough. If you are one of those animalistic riders that jumps into a Smith grind and just slams the front down as hard as you can, you know, you're probably still going to break some stuff. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just trying to, you know, I figure you guys would want to hear a little bit of something rather than just watch me wax a bike frame, which I'm about to spin this thing around and get going on this other side. Ooh. Gosh, I have no idea what this frame, what this right here weighs. But if I were to guess, this right here without the wheels on it, probably every bit of 20, like I'd say 20 pounds, 20, maybe even more, like between 20 and 25 pounds, I'd say. These things were built for battle. The mid-90s was, like I said, it was a really fun time in BMX. The 80s was rad, don't get me wrong. I love 80s freestyle bikes. I love all genres and just everything relating to BMX in general. Racing, freestyle, but when I was a kid, I was born in the early 80s, so the racing stuff, the early freestyle stuff, you know, I was really too young to enjoy and participate. And it wasn't until like the 90s, early to mid 90s, is when I really started to get involved in like riding bikes beyond just a, you know, recreational, just, you know, how am I trying to word this? Basically, the early and mid 90s was like the point in my life when riding my bike became more than just a way to get to my friend's house. You know, once the 90s hit and all my buddies were into biking, we would just meet up and just ride miles and miles and miles after miles building trails, building jumps, just going out in the woods, having fun. Life was so much simpler back then. Everything was so much simpler when we were kids, I tell you what. Pre-cell phone. So all right, got this thing pretty much, got a nice coat of wax on it. I'm going to go ahead and just start buffing it off. Like I said, I did not go super overboard with this one. I just wanted to shake the cobwebs off it and just make it look a little more presentable. That's all. And I'm not done yet. I think next move, what I'm going to do, probably going to try to shine up some of these chrome tidbits a little bit. Handlebars got a little bit of minor pitting and rusting on them. Pretty sure we'll be able to take care of that. Then once this thing's all cleaned up and put it back together, take for a ride. All right, this thing's looking really nice. Like I said, it buried a lot of those small hairline scratches, but like I said, it's still got a little bit of wear and tear on it, but that's to be expected. It's a BMX bike and it's a Survivor. It's in a lot better shape than a lot of the other ones out there are. So I think what I'll do now is I'm gonna go ahead and remove this brake mount, pull these handlebars off and possibly this stem, and just go through and get those cleaned up. Now we can put this thing back together. All right, so now I'm gonna pull these handlebars off so we can get these cleaned up as well. The Odyssey Modulever. Very interesting piece of kit. It's a very interesting bit of kit. What this thing did was allowed you to utilize 2 brake cables, which would result in a stronger and smoother pulling feeling brake. Hopefully none of these were seized. Ugh. Nope, that one's good. This one here. Ooh. All right. Cool, handlebars are coming off. They're not seized on there after decades. All right, we got the bars. Let's go ahead and get these cleaned up. All right, so I'm gonna start by trying to pull these grips off because these grips are pretty funky anyways. Yeah, those things slipped right off. Those grips are pretty much done. All right, I'm gonna start with the bars. Let's do the balls first. WD, my 4-0000 steel wool. You guys have probably seen me do this before. Just gonna start lightly buffing. Not gonna put all gorilla strength into it. You don't want to put too much force behind it. You just want to lightly buff. And by doing that, you will just slowly work all that pitting and surface rust out of there. And you will be left with some nice, shiny, clean bars. And the cool thing about using the 4000, you know, the steel, the finest steel wool, is like you can actually do this over decals and not really hurt them. So. When you're doing this, you always want to make sure that the surface you're working on is well lubricated. Otherwise, you'll run the risk of scratching them. Okay. You don't want to do that now. And these bars clean up pretty nice. Not perfect, but better than they were. All right, let's move on to this brake plate now. This thing will clean up just fine. See how it's got that little bit of rust on it back there? See how it's got this little bit of rust on it? I said it's not perfect, but we'll get her cleaned up. We gonna do the best we can, boss. Now this little piece here was actually a really cool innovation in itself. And what this thing, this big cheese brake plate enabled you to do was to mount good working 990 front brakes onto pretty much any fork for the time. You know, 990 brakes, you know, you need to utilize these post mounts in order to work. Well, a lot of manufacturers weren't really making, you know, adding brake posts to their forks. So this handy little creation allowed you to simply bolt on and add good working 990 brakes to the front of your bike. Very cool piece. Very innovative little product for the time. Another one of my favorite things, like I said, I liked about the 90s was just very innovative. And we were just, you know, we were just crossing off, making solutions for problems as they popped up. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, look at this thing now, baby. Big cheese. She shined up real nice. All that rust. We got all that rust off of there. Looks like a brand new piece. All right. I'm gonna start throwing this thing back together now. It's kind of neat how they utilize these hose clamps here. The idea behind the hose clamps was to, when the bike was under braking, these hose clamps were to keep this mount from deflecting and bending forward. Basically just making your brakes work stronger, if you get what I'm saying. All right, let's get these bars back on there. All right, it's brake lever time. All right, so we're cruising along pretty good on this thing. The only thing that I really have left to do now is put the wheels and tires back on it. And I'd like to try to find some different grips for this thing, although I'm not sure what I have laying around, but I'd like to at least look and see if I have anything. But for the most part, you know, cleaned up, waxed up, this thing's looking pretty nice. So let's go ahead and put these wheels and tires back on and go from there. Now that we got it out here in the stand, we can see all the areas that we missed. Naturally, that's how it works, is you think you're done, and then you take it outside, and then you realize, oh, I missed all of that. All right, let's go ahead and get these wheels back on it. All right, so I was able to clean these pegs up pretty good. They're not perfect, but they're a lot better than they were. Knocked off a lot of that really heavy rust, but there's still a little bit of pitting, but whatever, better it was. Me personally, I am a right side grinder, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this peg on the right side. All right, time for this here back wheel now. All right, so at this point we got the wheels and tires back on. It cleaned up really nice. The only thing I have left to do is to put some grips on it. I also got to get this chain put back on it, but first I'm going to go ahead and take the chain inside and get it cleaned up, and then we can put it back on. So I'm going to do that real quick and I'll be right back. I was able to clean the chain up a little bit, but it didn't come out perfect, but better than it was, that's for sure. Get our master link going on here. I like clipping my master link on from the back. I don't know, just more of an aesthetic thing, I guess. Out of sight, out of mind. Right, now we got our chain on, we can go ahead and adjust our chain tensioners. That feels pretty good. The only thing I have left to do now is just to put some grips on it. And for the grips, I'm going to use these grips I've had laying around, and these actually came on another bike that I got not too long ago, and they just didn't really fit that bike very well, but they will fit this bike perfectly. As you can see, these are actual Hoffman Bikes grips. There you go. As you can see, these are actual Hoffman bike grips. So these will be right at home here on this here Hoffman Condor. Alright, so I got my grips, got my compressed air and my little blow nozzle, and I got a couple of nickels. And some of my OG bike nerds will know that every time I install closed end grips like this that don't require bar ends, I always put a 5-cent nickel down in the ends of them. And what that does is the 5-cent nickel, as you can see, is like the perfect same diameter as the end of the handlebar. So it almost like acts as like a bar plug at the end. Basically it just keeps your grips from getting all blown out at the ends. Just something I've been doing for a long time. Slide the grip on as far as you can get it, and then come in with your air nozzle. Just like that, just drive it home. Come over here and do the same for this side. This side's a little trickier because I got the brake lever installed, but I'm sure we'll be fine. There we go. Ready to rock. These grips even feel nice on here. Normally I'm not the type to run these, I guess, pillow top kind of grips, but these don't feel too bad. And they look good on here too. So, all right, we done with it. All right, so here she is all cleaned up. And like I said, I didn't want to go too overboard and get too crazy with this one. This was more or less just a clean and a wax. Not really much to this one other than to just clean it up, but she's cleaned up pretty good, although it's not perfect. As you would expect, it has some imperfections and some scuffs throughout, but you know, it's a BMX bike, so that's pretty much to be expected. But other than that, I'm very happy with the way this thing turned out. Looks really nice. Adding that layer of wax to it really make this green pop, especially in the sun here. It almost looked black when it was in the house, but once you get it out here in the sunlight, that green really pops. Wheels shined up really nice, even though I didn't even touch them with any kind of metal polish. I more or less just wiped all the grease and funk and gunk off of them. But if I were to actually take the time and metal polish the hoops and even the hubs, those wheels would probably shine up like brand freaking new. The bars turned out really nice. You know, they had some rust on them, but no more rust on them now, as you can see. Stem cleaned up really nice, and like I said, I didn't even polish it or anything. I just more or less just gave this thing a bath and a nice coat of wax. So these grips definitely go right at home on this bike here. They feel good. They don't slip like the old ones did, and yeah, I'll definitely feel a lot safer when I'm riding this thing on Saturday. So, but anyway, you guys, I'm pretty happy with the way this thing turned out. It looks really nice. Not only does it look nice, I'll bet it rides nice too, which we're gonna take this thing for a ride here in a few minutes anyway. So I just wanted to show you guys what it looked like all cleaned up and out here in the sun. But yeah, pretty happy with the results, you guys. So let's go cruise this thing around for a bit. All right, you guys, so initial impressions. This thing rides super nice. Feels really solid. Steering feels really good. It's not super twitchy. It's honestly a really smooth riding bike. I know I say that about pretty much every bike that I ride, but that's just how it feels. There's only so many words in the English language to describe certain things, and you know, just telling you guys like it is. This thing rides amazing. Looks nice too. Like I said, that green in this sunlight, it just pops. It looks amazing. Brakes kind of suck, but these brake pads on the back are, like I said, they're 30 years old. They're pretty much petrified by now. It's petrified hardened rubber. It's not clicking or popping or making any weird noises. Wheels are rolling nice and smooth. Very happy with the way this one turned out. Yeah, this thing's riding nice. Let's go ahead and set it aside so we can just look at it. Yeah, baby. That is a good looking machine right there. The only thing it is missing at this point is some nice 3-piece cranks, which I definitely do have a set laying around. Need to dig them out and put them on this thing, but in the meantime, like I said, I'm just stoked with the way this thing is riding. Not only that, I'm stoked with the way it looks. I'm just stoked with this entire bike in general. This was a cool find, you guys. All right, you guys, so just got back from the test ride, and I'm very thrilled with the way this thing rides. Not only does it ride really nice, it looks great too. Just adding that coat of wax on this frame really made this green pop, especially in the sunlight. It just looks like a totally different bike now. Granted, we didn't go overboard with this one. More or less, we just gave this thing a nice bath. You know, I didn't go through any of the bearings or anything because it really didn't need much. More or less, this thing just needed a nice bath, and we just knocked a little bit of the rust and dust off of it and filled the tires up. But other than that, this thing is pretty much exactly as we picked it up, minus the grips that I put on it. Couple things I would like to change down the road, as I mentioned earlier throughout the video. I do get a nice set of mid-school, like 90s era, 3-piece profile cranks that I'd love to put on it, and I would love to eventually ditch this seat, but I checked my surplus of parts, and I didn't really have any mid-school seats that would be really fitting to this particular bike, so I gotta hunt and scour around and maybe come up with one of those down the road. But for now, I think I'm gonna keep this thing exactly the way it is, because, you know, it's exactly the way it was built. I am gonna also add the 990s to the front because it's only fitting that since we got the big cheese brake mount that it has the 990s on the front, but that'll be down the road as well. That'll give us something to do later on. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked with the way this one turned out, you guys. And it's only gonna get better from here on out, because like I said, once we get the cranks, the seat, the front brakes going, and maybe some new tires on it, this thing will be really dialed. I'm still uncertain if whether or not I'm actually gonna ride this thing tomorrow for the street jam, because after looking at these tires up close, they're starting to, you know, de-thread, and this back one's got some dry cracks in between the tread and whatnot. So trying to do 20 miles on this thing through the streets of Detroit, I don't know if that's gonna be very wise, but I'm still uncertain. I got more than enough bikes to ride, but I think it would be cool to be pedaling around in this mid-school tank that I picked up. So, but anyway, you guys, I think that's going to do it for this one. If you guys stuck around and watched this entire video from beginning to end, I really appreciate you guys. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps. Doesn't cost you nothing. I mean, it's just a matter of clicking that little button down there. It ain't going to hurt you to do it. Anyway, you guys, again, thanks for watching. Paul from BikeNerds signing out, and I'll see you in the next one.